Good afternoon. I'm Susan Bridges, and this is Whitespace Gallery, and I just want to say that it has been a complete privilege to be part of Connie's process. This has been a fabulous experience, and I'm not going to introduce Connie, but Sarah Durning is our new assistant here, and she's doing a wonderful job, and she's going to introduce Connie now.
Well, Connie, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you in this process. And I think everyone can tell from this body of work just what an amazing artist and person you are. So Connie's received a BA in psychology from Barat College, as well as an MFA from Yale University. Smarty. Her work's been featured in over 90 exhibitions, both nationally and abroad. And she's received numerous grants and awards for her work, including individual artist grants from the Georgia Council for the Arts and the DeKalb Council for the Arts, as well as many research grants from Georgia State University, a Hambidge Center residency fellowship, and she is also an associate professor of photography at Georgia State University. So, without further ado.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Oh, this is odd. There's an echo in here. Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I'm curious, though. I just wanted to ask a couple questions of the audience first before we started. I wanted to know if there are people in the audience who have experienced cancer. And then I'm wondering how many people in the audience have people that they love, that be they family or friends, that they've been personally involved or touched by cancer. So, my point being that cancer is ubiquitous. It's kind of everywhere, and everybody with greater frequency, it seems, is being touched by the disease. And I don't consider my experience unique. I think it's common. And there's nothing special, about it. But one thing that I learned by going through my experience, that going through cancer is a very, very, very individual thing. And for that person going through it, they have their own way, and whatever their way is the right way for them. And I just thought it might be helpful for me. I'm nervous talking about this, but I thought it might be helpful for me to tell you a little bit about my process of undergoing that experience, because I think it would be informative for you when you look at this work. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of history with you in sort of my process. When I realized that there was not a script that I had to follow in going through this, that I had the option of writing my own script, that was a very empowering thing, and it allowed me to create what I felt was the most optimal conditions possible to go through this. And it involved like taking a medical leave from the university where I was teaching, setting up a medical team of doctors that I had total confidence in, and doctors with whom I knew that I could come in with my 2 pages of questions from all the research that I was doing rapidly, that they wouldn't be like rolling their eyes and tapping their foot and putting their hand on the doorknob ready to get out of the room, that they would talk with me. And I also felt it was really important for me to supplement traditional Western care with supplemental and complementary care. So I maximized the services that were available to me and to anybody undergoing cancer at the Cancer Wellness Center at Piedmont Hospital. So I, pursued meditation classes, I did exercise classes, I worked with a nutritionist who altered my diet for every kind of treatment that I was going through. I engaged an acupuncturist who assisted with managing side effects. And he also was a Chinese herbalist doctor, so I did a regime of supplements. And for me, that was, very empowering. And I had, and I had used Susan Sontag's quote in my artist statement. And it was very much when I got that diagnosis of invasive breast cancer, it sort of, set aflame, a long-standing fear that I had had. My father died of pancreatic cancer when he was 45 years of age. My mother was diagnosed and treated for breast cancer when she was 46 years of age, and she survived until she was 84. My mother's family was riddled with cancer. She was the oldest daughter of 13 children, and 9 of her siblings had cancer. So I always felt that I was gonna, get nailed someday. And sure enough, when I got that diagnosis, though, it was like that quote in Susan Sontag, where I felt like somebody just handed me my passport. That we are all born with this citizenship where we can live in the world of the well for a while, but ultimately we are all at some point going to have to enter into that world of the illness. And so here was my passport. So I had to decide how I was going to make this journey. And so I did pursue all these things, that I mentioned earlier. And it was very empowering for me. I went through a surgery to remove the tumor in my breast in January. I began chemotherapy in February. Went through 4 months of chemotherapy, 2 months of radiation therapy daily, and then I had the genetics of my cells were such that I could take advantage of a targeted drug therapy. And that's why you see Herceptin all over here. So I had HER2-positive cancer cells, and there's this beautiful silver bullet drug that they developed that targets only those HER2-positive cells. So you take it for over a year. That's why you see so much Herceptin in the room. And I also went through, and now I'm on hormone therapy, where I'll do that for 5 years. So when it came time to go through those treatments, I guess I made a decision, but I had no intention of doing artwork about it. I mean, that was really clear in my head. I was like a graduate student in that I was doing research all the time. I was totally focused, and I had my job, and it did not include, doing artwork. That just was not in the realm of possibility for me. However, when I did start my treatments, I started from the onset collecting everything that came off my body. And that wasn't a novel practice for me, because I've done a few things like that in the past. I actually did a body of work in which I collected the contents of my vacuum cleaner for every month for a year. And I did a little archive, of those monthly contents. So I've done that before. I have this anise shrub in my yard. And don't tell me why, I'm just like kind of crazy. For 10 years, I've been collecting those little anise pods off that shrub. I've got something like 3,500 of those pods. And I don't know, I'll do something with them sometime. So that notion of collecting is not foreign to me, but I did not do that with the intent that I would make artwork out of it. I felt like it was an act of desperation, that people were taking things from me all the time. And it was a way of holding me, and also that it was sort of like giving me a sense of control, that I could manage something while I relinquished total control to the medical world. So those accumulated, and I just put them in a little rubber bag, or a Rubbermaid box, and put them in a Ziploc bag and labeled them, and they just accumulated, and they were there and they were fine, and they were sort of like a little security blanket. But at one point during my treatments, and it was after chemotherapy, that's the hardest part, for me it was, and I was in the middle of radiation. I was very clear that I needed and wanted and had to photograph myself. But again, it was not for artwork. I did not think that this would be something that I'd be bringing out into the public. My whole kind of experience with cancer was one that was much more private. I had a small group of friends and family around me, and that's all that I could concentrate on. So when I made these images, it really was out of necessity for myself. And I did want to, I mean, there was some purpose in it for me where I wanted to make an image that talked about how no matter how much support you have around you, for me, there is a quality of aloneness that you have when you go through that trip. And there is a aspect of it that is a little bit like being sent out onto a foreign planet, you know, that you're not connected with the earth. And you have to, you know, go through this thing in this other land. You know you will come back home. And also that I had passed through that tough part, and I wanted to acknowledge myself, you know, that I had that fortitude to do it. And so I made those self-portraits. And also another thing too was I was really curious about photography. You know, photography has this little lens, and it records what's in front of it, and it's very objective. And I had no idea, I could not relate to myself anymore because I had changed so much physically. I didn't recognize myself. And I just thought that'd be interesting, you know, to create these images and look and see if I could recognize somewhere. And so I made those images and I downloaded them to my computer and I looked at them and then they just stayed there for a long, 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 long time. And, you know, months went by, months, and only gradually did I start showing them one by one to, you know, different people. And meanwhile, I'm accumulating, you know, all of these what I call discard pieces. And at some point, I figured these two things, they could inhabit the same space and they could talk about something that was very complex for me to go through. And so then I started thinking about creating a body of work from this. And the discard pieces, they really kind of set sort of the pace and the parameters for me. And I took those pieces, you know, out of my little Rubbermaid container, and I went to the bathroom, you know, to do this work. And that seemed logical to me that, you know, our bathrooms are about our bodies, right? I mean, we go into the bathroom to refresh our bodies or renew our bodies or relieve our bodies. They're private spaces, you know, we go into our bathrooms by ourselves. And that floor, and I had, you know, this long, you know, sort of period where every day I'd be going in there and I would be watching this transformation occur, you know, with my body. And so I took those pieces and put them on the bathroom floor also because I felt that those tiles, they really did emulate for me what I, you know, kind of understood in all the reading and research that I did about sort of that microscopic world of cells and how they duplicate and how they form, you know, different masses and such. And so that seemed like an appropriate place, you know, to photograph them. So that led to, you know, sort of production. All of those, they were photographed. I had these, you know, figure pieces that I was looking at, and then I started selecting and showed the work to Susan, and I wanted to, you know, put together a show, and you know, hats off to Susan for supporting me. And I knew of her space, and I really wanted to nest this work where it would inhabit a space. I didn't want it to be anything that was paint. You know, I wasn't interested in like doing something that happened in October and it's not that I don't support any of those activities. I have, and I've done stuff like that, but I wanted to really give it a separate sort of honoring or something, in my mind. So this space was really beautiful, and I selected the work based on the space that, was available and the way it was sort of divided into this sort of entrance. And when I did these discard pieces, I wanted them to be just a little bit bigger. They're a little bit bigger than life size because I wanted to bring attention to them. I wanted people to be invited to kind of inspect them. And I also wanted to elevate them a little bit beyond something that was just like really sort of mundane. These pieces are very meaningful to me in that they are my lived history. This was, my life, and it's, sort of my documentation, my evidence. And the figure pieces, I wanted those to be just a little bit smaller than life, because I wanted to keep them intimate. And I wanted to invite people into, a psychological space. I didn't want to overwhelm people, with them in larger images. And so, yeah, come on in here. So my hope was that I sort of created these two places for people to consider. This kind of scientific, medical, maybe sort of clinical, and then these more sort of individualized and personalized, and that there would be a space in between there for an audience to just think about, what happens in between those two worlds. And I also created this piece back here. This is a light box that contains the ultrasound, actually, that when I went for my just an annual mammogram and a suspicious area was detected, and so an ultrasound was made. And after the ultrasound was imaged, I'll never forget the doctor saying, you want to look at this, and pointing to that very image and saying, we're really concerned about this. And so this is just an image of that tumor that you can see is like penetrating outside the ductal wall of the breast. So therefore it's invasive, meaning those cells have the ability to become mobile and go out into the system. So I knew I was in trouble. And then the other side of it is just a litany. I kept track of all kinds of data and information as I was going through this, and that was just sort of an interesting litany where I am, trying to make the point that this tiny little, 1.2 centimeter, creates a hell of a lot of chaos in people's lives. So, that's, just sort of the background of the work, and I am like totally happy to answer any questions that you have. And I do maybe want to preface your question with the fact that I am totally fine. And so if there's any concern about I'm totally fine. Anybody be worried about me? Okay. Yes.
Of the experiences that you had, what was the most surprising to you or the most unexpected anywhere along the course of your experience?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question because it was all a total surprise. I was big-eyed throughout. Maybe it was how engaged I was and fascinated I became by cancer and learning about it. I read this book that for me was very profound, and it really provided this sort of like umbrella where I could put everything that I had been experiencing and understanding and put it in context. And the book is written by Siddhartha Mukherjee, and the title of it is The Emperor of All Maladies, a Biography of Cancer. And it's just a brilliant, brilliant book written by an oncologist who is also a researcher. And a tome of a book in which he traces, sort of the history of cancer and all aspects of it, beginning from, 2,000 years ago on papyrus leaf, where they have, a recording of a queen who had her breast removed, and they think that this is the first recording of, actual breast cancer, to, the chemotherapy industry and how all those chemicals came out of the textile industry, it's just utterly, utterly fascinating. And in his book, and I can appreciate this, and I know it could be sort of haunting for people to hear it, but he talks about how cancer is really, he talks about the beauty of studying cancer and knowing cancer, and that it is really sort of the penultimate example of the life force, that there's this sort of drive to keep living and keep moving and developing. So that's just sort of like was mind-blowing to me in reading that book and having that to contextualize, sort of my experience. Just ask.
How did you choose the order of the placement on the wall? It's not linear.
Yeah. Well, when you walk in, those images on the left-hand side of the wall, those are all kind of first.
I had that.
Yeah, it's like sort of the process, and there were other processes, but those particular ones were the first sort of processes that I went through. On the right-hand side of the wall, those were sort of big things. When you lose your hair, you enter into a different kind of arena. That little bracelet that's pictured in like an eye shape, for me, it was just sort of like symbolic of that kind of infinity sign that, what goes around comes around, you're involved in the cycle kind of thing. And that biopsy too, that was it, that was the determining factor. In here, these images, this was the very first experience I had, the very first thing. I had a mammogram, just a routine mammogram that found a cancerous tumor, and then this is the very last treatment that I had. And I wanted them on this wall where the figure is sort of looking back in retrospective. But for me, also the figure is kind of always looking back, because now I know and understand that my body has a capability of producing those kind of cells. So I'm always a little bit cautious and looking in a way that I never have had to look before. And all of these over here, it really was kind of a graphic thing where I wanted to, make it interesting. And so there's not any kind of, logic to it other than that. Separating these that are, maybe to just sort of kind of create a little energy on the wall. It really was kind of like formal kind of graphic sort of considerations. Featuring some that, I got very attached to these. My printer, Marshall Michael, is here. And we started, I had little nicknames for things that, I feel very affectionate toward these. Like, this is my prosciutto.
You're what, Connie?
Prosciutto. This was our Texas Longhorn. This is my very, very favorite. This is my cocoon. The way that is just so tenderly wrapped, the way you wrap a baby. And so, I can say these things. I think maybe when somebody walks into the room at first, they're like, ooh. But I don't feel that way at all about these things.
So Connie, now that the show has been up for a couple of weeks, I know that you mentioned that originally you didn't take these photographs with the intention of exhibiting them. How has, we see people come in and they leave in all different states, and it does have such an effect on people. How has it affected your relationship with, and your experience with the disease, and your, what I imagine is just a consistent and constant healing process?
I don't know that I feel, my relationship with the disease is very distant,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm doing hormone therapy to keep estrogen out of my body in case there's any little cells in there, because my cancer was estrogen driven. They'll be deprived of their nutrition. And, you know, so I just feel like I'm like sort of maintenance, and I feel a distance from it. I'm struck by people's experience in coming in and how they respond to the work, and I'm really curious about that. You know, am appreciative that there is involvement, whatever that may be for someone.
I'm going to intercede, since we do have this in an artistic situation. I'm not going to get to this, but using the images you have, your portraits, I cannot stop thinking about Goya's Saturn devouring his children, and so it's almost like one got away. If you look at it this way. And so you spoke earlier of the fact that, you know, you were waiting for to be nailed, which is a whole other religious symbolism, which I'm not going to get into. And you also said photography is subjective. It's a myriad of things I'd love to go with you, but I'm not going to go there. But the big thing about it is you survived. Thus, do these images have some sense of redemption? Because this is not religious in its content, but there's a sense of, you know, a value in the sense that not particularly a victory per se, but as, you know, almost as in like, you know, I lived with this specter my entire life, and finally, as you know, as you said before, it got you. And now that you've removed this, and this is a whole other intimate level, you know, which is so nice too. It's not a gender-related aspect. You're sharing so many various things, your name, your birthday, all these things. So you're really playing on all sorts of gender-related issues with this that are fascinating to know a whole other level. But I really keep going back to this Goya thing in my head with you. And I just kind of, in the sense that you won, if you will. What is victory like?
Let me tell you just sort of a little story. I have had two big fears in my life. You know, one. The other is that I have this huge 75-foot oak tree that overhung my house, and it was 150 years old, and it leaned toward my house. Ever since I've been in that house, I've been afraid about that tree falling on my house. I've been down at Georgia State, and when there were storms going on, I would think about that tree falling on my house. That tree fell on my house. And it didn't do that much damage.
That's procrastination. It's a whole other thing.
And I got my house fixed up, and I'm fine.
That's procrastination.
And there's a parallel to that, you know, in terms of my other fear of going through cancer.
And those were beautiful photographs too.
Yeah.
So you're attached to these images and they are very important to you and all that. So do you have a plan? Do you still have
Yes.
the material? And will you keep that, or are you going to have a bonfire?
No,
and let that go? Or?
No, I'll keep those forever. If I get dust on them up in the attic, I don't care, it doesn't matter. Whoever cleans out my house when I'm gone, they can do the bonfire. No, they're sort of a part of me, you know, and I want to keep them.
Have you shared your, the fact that you did this, or that you had plans to do this with the medical team that you were working with?
I have invited people to come, and I'm going to see them on Tuesday and see who has come. That's been, you know, a real joy, you know, to know that some of them have come and seen things.
I'd be interested to hear if they have experienced like anything similar with other people that have gone through cancer and how they, you know, how they handle it.
Yeah. Because they certainly see it, you know, from, you know, their position of healers and helpers and.
So the self-portraits were done during the course of the treatment. And then these photographs were done.
This past summer.
Do you think the color of the self-portraits drew you to the color of?
It's just, I don't even question it. It's just sort of spooky to me, whatever. I mean, I didn't plan it that way. You know, that's in my bedroom. And that's a bench that's in my bedroom. And I just used the ambient light from the window in my bedroom. And I put a black cloth because I wasn't interested in contextualizing that space in which I existed.
Yeah.
I was in a no person's place. You know, and it was just consequential. I mean, it truly was, and I thought it was, you know, really marvelous and interesting.
Connie, how many of those big portraits did you do?
I did 3 of these here.
Because I saw a different one in, I think it was the Whitespace.
I have some smaller ones
Oh,
that, you know,
smaller.
maybe if they enlarge, because, you know, I did this with a self-timer and, you know, the focus isn't always accurate and some can stay small and they, I have another one that I've made large, but I just really felt that this was sort of enough, you know, for this space.
Was it a conscious decision to make them in association with the history of painting? That there is such, somebody mentioned Goya, that there's many other portraits, famous portraits from the Renaissance or probably Renaissance, and that kind of have a relationship to these, and I didn't know if that was something, like you have the black background, I'm just wondering if that was a conscious decision.
I mean, I don't know. You know, I know when I saw it, I recognized what you're saying. But when I did them, my intent with that black cloth was I wanted to put myself in this, you know, otherworldly space. And I didn't want people to be thinking about, oh, her bedroom or anything that was domestic.
You did that with some other work in that you removed the what we give photographs of reference as far as where they were.
I
And
had
you
done
wrote
that,
that
you
you-
wrote that Purge series where I
And
photographed.
you wrote that it put them into an abstract
That's
realm,
right,
so that
that's
you
right.
removed reference as to where.
That's right. What he's talking about, I had done a series of work entitled Purge in which I photographed people's yard debris, where people bring their yard debris down to the curb. And when I took my camera and framed it so there was no other information other than that debris, for me, it was kind of like creating these little worlds. So, yeah, that's true.
After I saw the show, I came on Saturday, and my memory of these was the space around each of these objects was very, a lot of space around them. And then when I came today, it's like, oh, there's not that much space around them. But my memory also was like, to me, it's like cells proliferating, you know, it just, I'm sure you have more of these, and I could imagine you, many of these, and it just reminds me of the way cancer grows.
Well, I mean, that's that quantity, for me, it was important that the quantity was here for people to understand that, you know, just this tiny little thing can generate this much treatment, and that, you know, I was interested in conveying the sense of monotony of that treatment. You do things over and over and over and over and over again, and you're just on this calendar, and you just, you know, go through it. And sort of the amount of treatment that it takes to, you know, promise eradication of these very, you know, persistent cells, you know, that are insistent. And so that's interesting to me.
Were you the only one involved in making these photographs? The white tape, it looks to me, it has a medical tape kind of a feel to it. And the lettering, you did all the...
Yeah, the little tape, that's from the infusion center. I asked them if they could give me some extra tape. You know, I like that tape, it's really thin, and it's a little bit translucent. And I would set up my, you know, bathroom floor with just a camera and a tripod, and over a course of days, you know, go through that little bin, and I have all this, you know, charting and list to make sure I get everyone, and OC, okay.
Are you continuing the self-portraits?
No, I just did it that one time, that was it, that's all. Interesting.
At the time of the self-portrait, the figures, the ones here and there in the other room, did you know at that point if you were in the clear, if you were going to be in the clear, or was it? I'm concerned about the relationship between your own perception of your mortality and being able to do these images.
I think that I felt that I was in the clear, in that the cancer that I had was an early stage. The grade of it, you know, there's like various grades, 1 through 5. My grade was 2. I had a high risk for poor prognosis and high risk of recurrence because of the genetics of my cells, but I had that little silver bullet of Herceptin. If Herceptin weren't here today, I would feel very uneasy. But I felt and my doctors told me that they were throwing everything at me, and that I was being treated very aggressively to assure that I would not recur. And my recurrence rate went from 38% chance, which you can't live like that, I couldn't live like that, to 9%, which is everybody else's in this room. So at that point I knew that the treatments that I had to go through would result in that. So I think that, I felt assured that I was getting the best care possible and that it would render the most positive results.
I feel compelled to say one time, though, that the one thing about these images, particularly portraits, I just keep thinking about what was going through Robespierre's mind as he was being led to the gallows. And you think about these images, like all the emotions that were going through, like for example here, when his jaw was broken, he couldn't speak. So for example here is this kind of thing, all these things he wanted to do and say, what these images can represent. And I'm not diminishing by any means the cancer, but the thing about it is, what's so nice is, Yeats wrote of the Irish Rebellion that a terrible beauty was born. So the same thing here is that, while this cancer is certainly horrible and no one's going to have to say anything nice about it, but the work that's come out of it is very positive. And so therein lies kind of a will to success. And I go back to, again, this idea of vindication. So it's really, have you thought about all that? I'm certainly thought about it, but I'm just saying, have you seen that in this? Have you been able to, objectively remove yourself enough to look at it? Because cancer is horrible. No one wants to talk about it. And so here you are in a way, this is really thrusting the image in front of you, but this and this allows people, particularly when you asked earlier about who all has been affected by cancer. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to talk about their parent dying or their siblings or whatever. But these images allow you to have that, the portraits particularly, to have that inner dialogue within yourself. And so it's a way, so you become like conduits, so it becomes easier to talk to you almost,
Part of my interest is demythologizing a lot about cancer, that the vast majority of cancers are treatable, the vast majority of cancers are cured. There are, lower numbers in which they're not, and that's, very tragic and sad and terrible. But, the vast majority of cancers are treated and people are cured of it. And though when we hear the word cancer, I'm totally there, it just really strikes very deep-seated fears in us. And I think that it prevents people from talking about it. And if you don't talk about it, then those fears get bigger and bigger and bigger. And those myths take on more and more substance. And then pretty soon you're making like decisions in life or whatever based on things that are, myths. And so I am interested in creating conversation and discussion and acknowledgement, that this is out there and it affects people. People survive it and they go on.
I guess the thing is, I don't see, again, I'm sorry, but I don't see this Susie Komen, I don't see you jogging and this kind of stuff, I don't see it happening. So that being said, the whole thing about it, this is, what you've done is you talk about the demystification of it. The fact is, it's approachable now. In a certain way, and this work allows you to have that discussion, so it's not spooky dooky. You can go, hey Connie, what's going on? And you can talk this, and this work allows that. But at the same time, I don't see it too being something that, that you're grounded by for the rest of your life. The next body of work will not be about this. It may have some, obviously it's going to be influenced.
I'm done.
It's like permeate.
My passport, I've got my passport back and I'm home.
That's vindication.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you,
Most
Connie.
welcome, most welcome. Thank you all for coming.